calling it second language writers. By second language writers in this context, I mean anybody and everybody who speaks English as a second language or a foreign language, are immigrants or indigenous people or Hispanic population who have been here for a very long time in the US, and also international students who come here and then stay back or leave, whoever. So these are, I'm calling this entire population in second language writers because there's not an all-inclusive term for this. And obviously, I do not differentiate between second language and foreign language, which Esther will do after some time, but then my presentation is on microaggressions. So now, I cannot see my slide. Okay, there you go. Okay, so microaggression in writing classrooms with second language writers. So what is microaggression? So it was originally coined by Chester Pierce and is rooted in critical race theory. Sorry for the typo. So obviously it primarily has to do with race and color and everything, but then obviously I am interested in writing, so it is a language skill, and that is why I'll be following the definition of Daryl Wing Su, who says that microaggression is the everyday verbal, nonverbal, environmental slights, snubs, or insults, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely upon their marginalized group membership. So this is the definition that I'm going to follow. So I think a lot of people who are second language writers like me, I am an international student, so my experience will not be the same as people who grew up here. I'm from Bangladesh. Obviously, in Bangladesh, we have a history of colonization, so my language learning journey was also not the same. So obviously, I just speak for what I have seen, what I have read, what I have experienced, but I am pretty sure a lot of second language writers like me have been through or have experienced some form of microaggression in their education or academic life. So this is the experience that I share. Now, based off of that, what are the most common types of microaggression that we see? Now, why I want to talk about why I am so interested in microaggression is if we don't talk about it, although it is a subject which is very sensitive, if we do not talk about it in the writing context, we will not know how to get rid of them or eradicate them. So that is why it's always important to talk about how we exhibit microaggression toward the language minority groups. Now, these are the 6 things that I've listed, but obviously these are not limited. Microaggression is not limited to only to the 6 categories. We have a lot more. I will ask you to help me out in this, but these are the 6 categories that I've come up with. So I will just select one and talk about it and then move on until I finish the 6. And maybe when we have the question and answer session, you can also pitch in and tell me any of the experience that you have gone through in your life as a teacher or as a student. Okay, so the first one, syllabus designed to meet the needs of native English speakers only. So why I have native in the parentheses is because oftentimes microaggression is subtle. So obviously we don't realize that sometimes it's subconscious, it comes from our subconscious. So we do not know while we're designing our syllabus, we do not think clearly that, okay, non-native speakers of English who are maybe immigrants or international students or who are even from different cultures might not understand some of the language used in the syllabus or the topics that are meant to be discussed. For example, like if you assign a student, okay. Okay, should I continue?
Yeah, yes.
Somebody was speaking, I thought. No, okay. Okay, we're good. So syllabus designed to meet the needs of native English speakers. So what I was saying is, like, if you assign a topic to a student, let's say Thanksgiving, for example. Now, in a writing classroom, Thanksgiving in US is a very popular thing. Everybody loves Thanksgiving, not only in US, in Canada as well. Like Thanksgiving is celebrated at different times, but the concept is more or less the same. But for a lot of people like us, we do not know what Thanksgiving is, although we would love to learn. And I love now, since I have been in the US for 4 years now, almost, I love Thanksgiving, but a lot of people, if you ask them to write about Thanksgiving, they wouldn't know. because we don't know what. I come from the eastern part of the world, South Asia, Bangladesh. We do not celebrate Thanksgiving there. We have other ceremonies or other festivals, but not Thanksgiving. So if those are the topics that are covered in a class, in a writing classroom, you're taking away an entire population out of the equation. They wouldn't know what to write. They wouldn't have topical knowledge. They wouldn't have linguistic knowledge, because there are certain things associated with certain festivals. Yeah, Holbrook?
Ice. Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
no worries. So those are the things that we have to be careful, and we don't know, and then we do it. Like when I was teaching back home in Bangladesh, obviously when I assigned, and a majority of them are bilingual speakers when I was teaching them, both English and Bangla, but I would choose topics that I knew that they would know. But obviously, given the mixed culture in the US, it's not a good initiative to take, like when we assign topics like that. So obviously keeping in mind, and oftentimes we don't think about that, but obviously topics matter a lot, or even the language that is used. Now, speaking of language, I want to talk about the second point, providing instructions that are only clear to first language writers. Because being a writing tutor for so long, like I have seen a lot of second language writers, or mostly international students, they do not understand most of the idioms. So in instruction in the classroom, when you're providing instruction, and if you use that kind of language, they automatically just get fixated on those idioms, and they cannot catch anything when you speak further. So speaking from experience as well, like I had to, like I have learned English all my life. I started learning English when I was 3. So, but still a lot of idioms are new to me. Learning English for that long, when I don't know all the idioms, how do you expect people who are learning English for the past 5 years, or even 2 years, to understand what exactly those idioms mean? So providing instructions that are only clear to first language writers, that is what I mean, that when you're using language in the classroom, where you're giving directions, you have to be explicit, to the point, and use language that does not have a dual meaning or is not ambiguous. Now, coming to the third point, instructors focus on grammar correction rather than content. It is very common for instructors to become fixated on correcting grammar of students when they're second language writers, which they wouldn't do if it was a first language writer, because obviously, like being a bilingual or a trilingual, you have multiple language structure in your head. So when you're writing something, you might mix them up, and there are grammatical issues, but writing classrooms are not about correcting grammar. It is more about the content. So that is also a form of microaggression, when you're not like thinking about the content of the student, and rather thinking, like fixating on the language that they're using in their paper. It is important, grammar is very important, but you can always direct them to other resources, or give them minimal feedback on grammar, and push and let it just go through let them go through other resources, but then the content comes first. Now, number 4, choice of readings and text. Okay, since I have come to the US, I came in 2016 fall to get my MA, and now I'm a doctoral student. But like there were very few classes where I was given to read a text which was not written by white authors, or I didn't read any text. I think only one of the classes I read a Bengali author, who is like my first language is Bangla. So that was there was only one class where I read somebody who was from my ethnicity, and they were writing in English, and they wrote a great article. Everybody enjoyed reading it in the class. So now, if we do not help students to read about other cultures, we are actually giving them the permission to be microaggressive to our other cultures. So like if we just let them read Dickens or Shakespeare, like we are just continuing with with one culture or one language. So obviously, because if the authors are English language, like native English language speakers, they will have one perspective. I mean, they will have multiple perspectives, but I just want to say that they're grown up in a westernized environment, and their thought process are pretty much if I don't want to say similar, they come from the same mindset somewhat. So if they just read if students are allowed to only read texts written by certain authors and exclude the others, we are taking away the privilege that they have, like of being bilinguals. Or so what I want to say is, if we can, I mean, obviously, if they should read English texts. A lot of authors translate other people's work. So if there's, you don't find a first language, right, like second language writer writing in English, you can always translate their work or find a translation. Or there are other authors who actually write in English, who are from different ethnicities. So bringing those work is also important. If you do not, that is also a form of microaggression towards a certain group of students. Now, the fifth one, classmates alienating second language writers during group work. Now, I have faced this myself, like just because I come from a different culture, somehow that just means I know less, or I don't speak English as my first language. That makes me dumb for some reason. For some of the students, I'm not saying a lot, most of them, but that has been the case. Like subconsciously, they just think like when you think alike, because like when you're grown up in the same country, you have a lot of things that you can discuss, which a lot of students like us, like second language writers, wouldn't know. So obviously, if we cannot contribute to those kind of topics, they just exclude the students from the conversation. So in group work, a lot of, and peers usually try to alienate the other group, which they call the other because they're not English as a first language speaker. Now, the sixth one, not acknowledging other cultures and languages. Now, that obviously can go into any of the categories I've discussed above, but why I have put it separately is because when being an international student, like I just think in the US, people talk about international students to be just one single group, but we have so many different experiences growing up. Like we come from different countries, we speak different languages, so our educational systems are different. So if we just say international students, add all international students to be the same, it's not fair, because you are actually not trying to understand the educational experience of students, and you're not, like, if you're excluding that, you'll not be able to help the students as they need it. And so I come from a country which has colonization history. Like English was, I mean, we were not forced to learn English, but we introduced English in our education system like 200 years back, and it is still there. So we learn English from pretty early on in our lives. It doesn't matter if you go to an English medium school or a Bangla medium school, you learn English as soon as you go to school. And that's not the case in a lot of countries. So if you just use the umbrella term international students and think everybody will be the same, that's not fair. So that is also a form of microaggression, because you don't know your students well. Now, so there are things that need to be done to obviously raise awareness so that microaggression becomes lesser by the day. So what are some of the things that you can think of that can help to reduce microaggression? So you can type your thoughts right now, or we can discuss this when everybody else is done, because we have other 3 presenters presenting. But I just want to quickly go back to this slide, and then just since I have mentioned all these 6 categories, what can we do to reduce microaggression? So obviously in syllabus design, like I was saying, you have to be mindful of what kind of topics you're choosing for your students in the writing classrooms, so that when you assign the topics, that all the students have the same amount of information or knowledge, or you can direct them to sources where they can find information about the topics that you have assigned. Now, the second one, obviously, when I talked about instruction, you have to be very clear, explicit, not use like ambiguous language, so that it is clear to all kinds of students. Now, third one, instructors should be consciously aware, or should be conscious about not fixating on students' grammar rather than focusing on their content. They can help them with grammar. There are many websites now that provides lessons on grammar. You can also give them like books to read, and also giving them text to read, like maybe shorter text, because I have seen that reading helps me to understand language better. So maybe assigning them with shorter text, because a lot of students don't like reading very long text. So assigning them with shorter text so that they can read it every day. And in the process, they can learn the language too, or the grammar structure of English. Choice of text, obviously including more authors of different cultures and different languages. And now the fifth one, I think it is, so I went to a writing symposium like a year or two back, and they made us do a project, like it was a pair work where like they gave us a blindfold, then they gave us a sheet of instructions where like all the directions were, and then they gave us blocks, Lego blocks, and we had to build a structure. But one of the persons in the pair was blindfolded, and another person would read out the instructions, and the blindfolded person would have to build a block. So that was a group activity. Like that just shows, and the other person who's reading it out and not blindfolded, they can't touch the blocks. They have to give proper instructions so that the blindfolded person can build the Lego into the desired figure. So this is like, this grows empathy, I just think, and we saw that. So obviously the blindfolded person is mostly the people who are second language speakers, I think so, but we can do it in our classrooms where I don't want to mean it to be sadistic, but then that they can do it with like the first language writers, like English speakers can also do it to other languages so that they can see each other's point of view, and then learn in the process that, okay, so the second language writers go through a lot, and that just can build sympathy, this kind of activities. And not acknowledging other cultures and languages, meaning you can always talk about culture in the classroom, give examples which are multicultural, and not stick to just one monolingual culture. So these are the things that I thought were important to talk about, and we have other speakers who would join us. So I will pass the mic to Esra now. And if you have any kind of suggestions that I said, or any kind of questions, we can leave it at the end of the session so that we have time for all the speakers to speak. Thank you, and I am going to mute my mic. Esra, you can come in, thank you. And I'm also going to unshare.
Right, thank you, Rumaisa. So I'm going to share my screen right now.
Is it not possible for you to also go on video so that we can see you?
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Esra, and today I will be demonstrating some instruction strategies to support writing in a foreign language. Since my research focus is in Arabic as a foreign language writing, I will be giving examples from the Arabic language, but these instruction strategies can be applied to any foreign language learning and teaching.
We want to see your face.
So I'm sorry, my camera is not working. So first, I would like to talk about the difference between second and foreign language. So basically, learning a second language is when the students learn the language in a place where it is the main language of communication. For example, when a child immigrates from Mexico to the United States, they are learning English as a second language because English is the dominant language and the main language of communication. The students have an immediate need or opportunity to use and practice the target language outside the classroom. On the other hand, learning a foreign language is when the students learn the language where it's not the language of communication and they do not have an opportunity to use it outside the classroom. Therefore, the students are not immersed in the target language environment. For example, when students learn Arabic in the United States, they don't have enough exposure. They have very limited social interaction. Next, I would like to share what Vygotsky have said about foreign language acquisition. I like this quote from Dr. Holbrook's paper, Vygotsky and Second Language Acquisition. So Vygotsky believed that the child learns a foreign language in school differently than he learns his native language. He doesn't begin learning his native language with the study of the alphabet, with reading and writing, with conscious and intentional construction of phrases, with definition of words, or with the study of grammar. Generally, however, This is all characteristics of the child's first step in learning a foreign language. The child learns native language without conscious awareness or intention. He learns the foreign language with conscious awareness and intention. So my understanding here is Vygotsky believed that children develop language through social interaction with adults who already know the language, and through this interaction, they learn to connect their thoughts and the language they are learning. So you can see here it's more challenging for students to learn a foreign language due to lack of interaction, a social interaction, and the very limited exposure to the language outside the classroom, which may impede their progress in learning the skills of the language. So before I talk about the instruction strategies, I would like to talk briefly about some of the challenges of writing as a foreign language. So the first challenge is the first language influence. So most beginner foreign language learners bring their first language orientation to the writing task in a foreign or a second language. That could be a problem if there is a language variation between the first and the foreign language. So if the first and the second language have different writing script or different syntax, for example, in this case, the variation may have an impact on the development of the writing skills. For example, when it comes to syntax, unlike in the English language, nouns in Arabic always come before the adjective. One of the common errors I found my students make is that they write the adjective before the noun. I believe this error is because students employ their first language resources when writing in a foreign language. So in this area, I do agree with Vygotsky when he argued that when children enter school, they begin to develop a conscious awareness of their attention and memory, but they do not have a conscious awareness of their own thinking process. So if we want to make a connection between that and the foreign language learning, it will be that those young students who learn how to write in a foreign language may be aware that they are learning a new language, but they are not aware of the thinking process. They cannot differentiate between the thinking process of writing in a first and the second or a foreign language. The next challenge is the writing script. So another difficulty for Arabic as a foreign language learners, especially the beginners or in the elementary level, when writing in Arabic is a different writing script from their native language, which is English in my case, because all my students, their native language is English. So the alphabet in Arabic is completely distinct from the Roman alphabets. The Arabic alphabet consists of 28 letters. There is no upper or lower case, however, some of which have as many as 4 different shapes, depending on their position in a word. Also, the Arabic script is written from right to left. So studying the shapes and the sounds of a foreign alphabet is not only a special difficulty for Arabic writing, but it's also a physical issue of adjusting to an opposite direction of movement in reading and writing. Another challenge of writing in Arabic is that unlike English language, most of the Arabic letters are written in a cursive fashion and they are joined on both print and handwriting. Another challenge would be the phonological variation. So the phonological distance between first and foreign or a second language have a big impact on the development of writing skills in a foreign language, according to the ESL researchers. So Arabic and English influences the phonological representation of Arabic words among students who speak English as a first language. For example, as you can see here on the screen, these are 9 letters of the Arabic alphabet that represent phonemes that have no English equivalent. These phonemes can lead to difficulties for students in both pronunciation and spelling. Now I would like to talk about some instruction strategies that researchers in ESL field believe they are effective, as well as some strategies that I found them effective when teaching writing to my students. So the first one is the first language translation. So from my research, several scholars have examined whether students composing writing first in their first language and then translating into the foreign or a second language is conductive strategy. They found out that using this strategy demonstrated a higher level of syntactic complexity, as well as improvement in the area of organization, style, and content for older students. So the reason for this is because the students who have already learned how to write in their first language may use the same strategies when they are composing in their second or foreign language, as planning, developing ideas, revising, and editing their writing. Also, foreign language learners can utilize first language when planning and organizing their essays by talking to themselves in their native language, or by getting engaged in different forms of first language inner speech. So in my opinion, from my own experience, in order for this strategy to be successful, the students need to have a deep understanding of the interrelationship between thinking and language acquisition processes. This will allow the students to understand that in order to improve his writing skills in a foreign language, he needs to think in that foreign language. Also, the similarities between first and second or foreign language can have a big impact in improving the writing skills. I'm talking about the similarities in the writing script. For example, it's easier for an Urdu speaker to learn how to write in Arabic, which shares similar writing scripts and many cognates with Arabic, than English speaker to learn Arabic, which have totally different writing script and less cognates. Finally, in order for the foreign language learners to use this strategy, they need to have a high proficiency level of the foreign language in terms of all the aspects of language, phonology, syntax, morphology, and so on. The product approach is another instruction strategies, and some scholars call it imitation strategy. So this is a traditional approach in which students are encouraged to mimic and model text, which is usually presented and analyzed at an early stage. This approach encourages students to imitate writing model supplied by the teacher. So the product of approach is an effective strategy. I use it in my class, and I saw a big improvement in the writing tasks with my foreign language learners. And I think the reason for that is because it relies on scaffolding. For example, the teacher can show the learner a piece of writing and use as a guide for the writing task, or the teacher can write the assignment with the students and explain the strategies used. Then the teacher would ask the students to compose their own writing and to be able to watch them while they are writing their assignment. In my opinion, this strategy is more suitable for young learners and learners who are beginner to the writing, to learn how to write in a foreign language. Finally, this product approach develops students' self-confidence because they can see their final piece of writing. The next strategy is pre-writing. So I want to give an introduction before I talk about this strategy. Various researchers in the second language field acknowledge that students who acquired writing proficiency seem to have managed the anxiety level they experience when writing. These students presented a positive attitude and seemed to be confident about their ability to execute the writing skills. So high motivation, self-confidence, and low anxiety can help learners to be more open with their classmates and teachers, to share what are the best options for learning a certain topic. So pre-writing that include group work and peer review is viewed as an effective strategy in writing in a foreign or a second language. Group work and peer review help second language learners raise their awareness of the writing topic, defeat their anxiety, and trust their writing skills. This strategy is not only helping foreign language learners to take risk examining the foreign language knowledge they already acquired, but also to create and develop new language skills through the process. And they can use the pre-writing approach through brainstorming, listing, mapping, and any other strategy that they would like to use. The last strategy is the self-regulated strategy development. So again, many researchers of second language acquisition have argued that what makes any writing strategy effective is by how students are going to have deep understanding about it and how they apply it. So self-regulated strategy is a teacher-based approach. It can help teach students how to apply different kinds of writing strategies through providing support and deep understanding of that specific strategy. And I think this aligns with Vygotsky theory regarding the zone of proximal development, because according to Vygotsky, the responsibility for learning initially relies more on the more knowledgeable other, which is the person assisting and guiding the child with crossing the zone of proximal development, which is the teacher in our case. Through scaffolding, the teacher assessed the students as they work through the zone of proximal development, then diminishing the guidance as the students make progress. So basically, this strategy begins with teacher's direction and ends with students independently applying this specific strategy. So the self-regulated strategy development consists of 6 steps. The first one is providing background knowledge. So the teacher would provide background knowledge that the students need in order to use a certain kind of writing strategy. Then the next step is to discuss this strategy with the students and see what they understood from it. What are the downsides? Can this strategy help them, or just talk about their feedback? And then model how to use this strategy. So the teacher would write an assignment in front of the students and apply this strategy, and the students would observe how the teacher is using that strategy. The next step is to the teacher to help the students to memorize the steps of the writing strategy. After that, the teacher would give the students assignment she will ask them to write the assignment using that strategy that she just demonstrated, but she is going to be supporting those students. The last one is independent performance. So after that, helping the students memorize the steps, and then ask the students to use the strategy while teaching, providing support, and then watching the students independently perform that strategy. So this self-regulated strategy aim to help students apply any strategy without guidance. And these steps can be combined, changed, reordered, or repeated depending on the needs of the students. So I'm done with my presentation, and now I think it's Hind's turn. Thank you. I'm gonna unshare my.
Esra, could you please share my screen? I couldn't share my screen.
You want me to share it for you?
No, I couldn't. Okay. Oh, yes, okay. Could you please stop your screen?
All right.
Okay, hello everyone. This is Hind. I hope all you stay healthy and safe under these circumstances. Today I'm going to talk about teacher feedback on writing compositions. Teacher written feedback plays an essential role in a student writing processes. This presentation will cover the following points. What is the meaning of writing feedback? The role of teacher written feedback, and then features of good teacher written feedback, and then major issues of teacher feedback on student writing. So, what is the meaning of writing feedback? According to Joe, he said, it is an inseparable and recursive component of both the teacher's instruction and writing processes. It represents a sense of audience and purpose informing the ongoing writing processes, while establishing a concept of collaborative reader-editor relationship between teacher and student. The feedback from the reader editors appear as input for further re-examination and revision of the prior written work by providing optimum opportunities to develop and refine idea, and may take various forms such as conference and interview. This concept of feedback given by Joe is probably one of the most comprehensive one. It is considered the most through one that covers almost aspects of teacher feedback, namely the position of feedback in writing instruction, writing processes, the relation of student-teacher in process writing, also the form of feedback, and finally the role of feedback in writing processes. As I mentioned before, that the teacher plays an essential role in writing processes, we have the rule that the teacher should follow during giving the feedback. We have here the importance of teacher feedback, can be seen by Straub when he said, it is how we receive and respond to student writing that speaks loudest in our teaching. In the absence here of face-to-face verbal writing conference, written response is the only way in which teacher can respond to individual's need of a student. The second point, or the second rule of teacher written feedback, it might help student to identify their own strengths and weaknesses, which in case of the latter will make student how to go about improving themselves and become effective writers. In this point, the teacher can use the comment on student writing. The third one, which is according to Veris, teacher feedback, if addressed effectively, can also contribute to student overall second language acquisition. In this point, feedback is considered, first of all, as a pedagogical tool to help enhance student writing competence. Features of good teacher written feedback. What constitutes good teacher written feedback is a complicated issue. There is a little consensus among researchers over the matter as in reality. Different individuals may prefer different type of feedback, while some people enjoy negative and direct feedback. Others may feel discouraged by the same feedback. Therefore, it is normal to see a different set of criteria for good teacher written feedback. So according to Coven, he said that there are three vital elements of good feedback: positive comment, criticism, and suggestion for improvement. The coexistence of positive comment and the second point, criticism, according to Veris and Hitchcock, they said will bring about the best effect. Also, positive comments can motivate writers. Negative one can constructively show them where they have gone wrong and what action they should take in order to prove their papers. The third one, which is suggestion for improvement, it is also needed as a guideline for students to make a revision. Researchers and teacher feedback also list a large number of other criteria. The aforementioned set of criteria only mentioned the element constituting a good teacher feedback. Researchers on teacher feedback also list a large number of other criteria. Among them, we have here the first one is Lecky when he said, feedback is only good when teacher concentrates on the content along with a limited amount of feedback on grammar, punctuation, and spelling. Also here we have these researchers when they said, high quality feedback should be timely, accurate, constructive, out-focused, encouraging, and positive. What is more, good feedback must necessarily avoid unknown deprivation code, ambiguous, and unobtainable suggestion for improvement. This set of criteria, in comparison with the three ones that I mentioned before, is more sufficient in my idea. It covers nearly all aspects of good feedback. That is, the element of good teacher written feedback, the tone of teacher feedback, which is encouraging and giving positive, as well as the practically of the feedback obtainable suggestion. The existence of different way to define the criteria of teacher written feedback indicates that there is no standard type of teacher feedback. So there's no standard type we have to follow in the criteria of giving feedback. It is therefore necessarily that each teaching and learning environment carry out research to find what is the type of feedback that could suit their student most. Moving now to this slide, which is talking about the major issues of teachers' feedback on student writing. We have two major issues, in my opinion: content of teacher written feedback, and also the second one, which is types of teacher written feedback. Before I go through these major issues, providing effective feedback to students has been a matter of concern among writing teachers as well as the researchers. So a great number of questions have been asked. What should teacher comment on? To which extent should feedback? Which type of comments are most effective? And so on. There's a lot of questions. However, it is in fact that researchers have not reached a consensus over the answers to these such questions. So let us start from the first one, the first issue, which is content of teacher written feedback. Here we have, they note, much of the conflict over teacher response to written work has been whether teacher feedback should focus on form or on content of the writing. Teachers have been faced with a constant question of what to focus when giving feedback to student writing. Content here in the first point is, in their opinion, refer to comments on organization, ideas, and amount of details. While the form, in their opinion, they said it is on comments on grammar and mechanical errors. The second point, traditionally, teachers were inclined to identify and correcting all the surface error. They said, explains that teachers correct error out of the fear that erroneous structure would become puzzled in the student. However, the mere focus on form corrective would have a detrimental impact on student writing. Let's imagine that a student who receives a corrected draft from a teacher with a red ink all over the page. This would only add to student anxiety when dealing with another writing task. Also, A large amount of errors correction may draw the student attention to just the form only, not to the important matter of developing the content. This because when teachers give feedback, it just focus on the form, which is grammar, punctuation, spellings, and etc. Many students here in this situation will receive their writing by correcting just the surface mistakes and will make maybe a few or no other changes. The result here is that a student rewriting become just for the grammar exercise rather than challenging to clarify the meaning of the writing. The third one is the grammatical inaccuracies can have negative effect on the overall quality of the student writing. Here, in some other research, there seems an agreement that attention must be paid to both content and the form for the fact. In short, what to feedback on remains is a complex issue, though many studies have been carried out on the issues, a consensus over the matter has not been reached yet. This is indicate that the further studies are needed in order to find out the answer for these problems. The second type, which is teacher written feedback. This part will present some major types of feedback, which are A, positive feedback versus negative one, B, direct versus indirect feedback, marginal versus end feedback. These type of feedback are discussed and compared in pairs in a way that the differences between them, and they will give the advantage and disadvantage of one type over the other will be highlighted. So starting with the first one, positive feedback versus the negative one. Here we have, they suggest that positive comment gives student motivation to improve their writing. When students are told they are doing right, they feel motivated to write more and to write better. However, in the first point, only positive comment is not sufficient enough to motivate a student to improve their writing. On the other hand, negative comments are more useful, for example, for many students, how they want their problems to be highlighted. But too much negative, on the other hand, may adversely affect student writing. And they reread writing with red marks, as I mentioned before, all over the page. Students may feel discouraged and stop trying to correct the mistakes. So all the things is considered and advisable that teachers get a balance between praise and criticism, since the combination of both kind will bring the best effect. The second one, or the second type of teacher written feedback, is directed versus indirected feedback. Directed feedback is teachers' explicit written correction in response to students' error. With direct feedback, students are expected merely to transcribe the teacher's suggested correction into their text. Indirect feedback, on the other hand, is when the teacher alerts students to error using general comments, but giving students the opportunity to fix error themselves. Here, the indirect feedback is more helpful to student writers. In most cases, because it leads to greater cognitive engagement, reflection, and guided learning, and also problem solving. Since here the teachers only point the mistake or suggest the way to correct them. Students, they have here to figure out the way to correct the mistakes on their own. This is the long run helps prompt student thinking, as well as the ability to self-edit their own writings. Also, when having to correct the mistakes by themselves, students normally remember the mistakes better. So they are more likely to be able to avoid them in the future. So beneficial as a direct feedback to students for mistakes that are too complicated. Direct feedback prove better than indirect one, because it saves students from discouragement when they could not solve the problems on their own. All things here is considered, it would be the best way that teachers combine both direct and indirect feedback when they respond to student writing. The third one is marginal versus end feedback. Marginal feedback is the kind of feedback that is written in the margin or between sentences line of the sentence papers. On the other hand, end feedback refers to the summary feedback at the end of students' papers. According to Verse and Hitchcock, they said there is no conclusive evidence that either marginal comments are preferable or more effective. In reality, each type of feedback is used with a certain aim, while marginal comments are more suitable to respond to a specific section of the text or writing composition for students. And comments, on the other hand, are usually saved for more global concern affecting the entire composition. To sum up, as the above literature indicates, there is no consensus over what constitutes effective feedback. As a result, in order for teachers to make full use of feedback, they need to adjust the type of comments to the certain kinds of students. I may end my presentation with these questions. Does teachers' feedback on writing compositions consider it as a part of ZBD? Since we know that ZBD there's interaction between verbal instruction between a student and teacher. So shall we consider feedback as a ZBD part or not? Thank you, and may Kitikit represent the final presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? You hear me well? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Kitika, and I'd like to continue from what Hines have presented about the feedback. And I would like to share with you and encourage you to think of the feedback in terms of how it is influences how students conceptualize writing in a second language. And so I have a question for you to think about why the feedback is important and what is its concept behind giving feedback for us as a teacher. So I'm not sure I don't think we have time to discuss, so I'm just gonna move on and maybe we can discuss or talk about it later. So Highland and Highlands 2006 have a quote that really stood up to me, and I think it's really important that the information in feedback as a key factor is in learning to write. However, it is effective only if it's engaged with the writer. And this is really stood up to me. But however, theoretically is that, but what's really happened in the classroom, especially in EFL and ESL writing classroom, as I grow up learning, and this is what happened. And I, all through my life, studied and growed and studied in Thailand. This is all this is the only kinds of feedback I received throughout my life. Maybe this is maybe a good example for me, but recently, here is the paper from my student, very recent student back in Thailand. And this is still what is going on in that kind of environment. And also I believe this is somewhat happened more or less here in the States, maybe in some ESL classroom, I believe. So anyway, let's think in terms of what is it going to happen if the students receive this kind of feedback over and over and over again, like me, myself. So growing up receiving this kind of feedback, I think I developed a concept of what is it important in English writing. And you can guess, right? It's the grammar, right? So yeah, and becoming a teacher, I think that concept passed on me, and this is, I continue to give this kind of feedback to my student as well. And I felt really overwhelmed with the amount of the student paper that I have to grade, and I have to give feedback. And also I feel pressure from coming from both the institutions, the program, also the parents who wants me to provide feedback to their students in terms of grammar, and also I can feel that students also feel overwhelming with receiving this kind of feedback, and sometimes they don't even know how to fix it, right? So let me move on. So it makes me think of this slide. So I asked, what is the construction of feedback? So the context, as we mentioned a lot in our Vygotsky seminar, that the environment we live in, the interactions that we have with others, and the surrounded environment become a part of our thinking and languaging system, conceptualized system. So a feedback construct with the content we live in, the constitutions, the writing program. And the second block here is the way we think or how we judge a writing, and the way a person's belief, or I think I would say this is the way people have conceptualized the idea of what is important in terms of writing. And then that leads to how a person, such as like a teacher, define their role, whether when they give feedback, they want to be a teacher, they want to be a proofreader, facilitator, the gatekeeper, or like the police grammar, you know, or maybe if the teacher would want to be a reader, and how can a teacher provide feedback more effectively? That's what my I've been interested in this area since I started the PhD programs here. So I think this is also from articles from Highland and Highland. He suggested that we need to create the interpersonal relationship between us as a teacher or us as a provider to our peer with the writer. So, and also thinking in terms of opportunities, as Vygotsky mentions that opportunity is not one side, but both sides. What that means in terms of feedback is that the teacher also teaching and learning from the students at the same time. So what we need to learn as a teacher, we need to learn, just like Romaisa said or mentioned earlier, like what is their background and how they what are they English learning journey and how they grow up learning the language and all that kind of thing. And also students also need to provide us the information that they need us to know of, like what kind of feedback or maybe what is the student's main area that they want to communicate in their writing. So with that, I would like the next slide. I want to share with you some of the strategy that I think would be maybe effective for us as a teacher, and also for us as a teacher to teach students to kind of try to change the concept from the grammar, the essential of grammar approach to writing into in terms of communicative approach more with that. So the first strategy that I've used this last semester with one of the international students. So I think using a visual map is a very effective way for me to get to know the writer, especially L2 students or EFL learner, because with using this visual map, I think I get a lot of detailed information from her, and also it's kind of open up our relationships. And since I started to share my pictures, here is my picture. So it's about me, and then I asked the students to do the same thing, and she started to talk to me. And there's a lot of words that she don't know how to describe, but then she can draw and express that out to me. And I kind of, okay, I got into her feeling more. So, I mean, maybe if we want to give feedback in the writing classroom, and maybe we have the student draw a map of how they think of how is it important to write in English for them. So maybe we can get a sense of where our students are in terms of the zones, right? The zones of proximal development that we've been discussing throughout this semester. And the next strategy that I think it would be a very good strategy to apply to give my student written feedback, and also to teach my students to be able to provide feedback to their peer, because most of the time when I assign my students to give feedback to peer, they commonly and typically they want us refuse to do that, because only their focus is on grammar, and whenever the students do not understand the grammars, and so they think that they wouldn't be able to provide anybody else feedback, and I think that is wrong. So I think using this strategy might help them to start giving feedback to their peer, and also to themselves as a writer, to think of the written piece in terms of the reader, but not the grammar police, like that we've been doing all along. And it's not the most essential part of the writing for communications, right? So the task strategy is that you tell the writer what do you think and what do you like about their writing. So in this way, teacher can tell how or what they like about the student writing. This is the very important one that I never received a kind of feedback that tell me like, what have I do a good job in my writing before. I mean, back in Thailand, where my home country, I never received, I don't even know like which part of my writing is which part that I did a good job, you know? And so, yeah. And the A is stand for to ask a question. So maybe we find some content in the student writing that is not clear, so that we could ask like for the students to illustrate or to explain their point more with the A, maybe this one, and then the last one, G, stands for to give suggestions. So you tell the students how they should improve in what way. I mean, in terms of content instead of grammar. Maybe also if you want to focus, if you want to point some of the grammar that it is necessary for each individual student to improve, like maybe you can ask them to, you know, study more about present simple tense or present progressive tense, and that would be it for an activities, right? And the next one, the next strategy is the 2-star and 1 wish. It's the same idea, but just a variety of it. This is not what I created my own. Actually, any one of you can just search on Google on all of these strategies, and maybe you like to apply it. So the 2-star and 1 wish is you tell the students what you like about 2 things that you like about their writing, and 1 wish. So the 1 wish could be a thing that you wish them to improve, or you wish to see on their piece of writing, like that. And the next strategy is the hat. This strategy, maybe you can apply for assign the student to get together in groups, and then assign each person in a group to have different colors of the hat. So they have different roles to act when they try to give feedback on each other's piece of writing. And so in this way, students can, you know, they can just focus on one role at a time, and so practice or develop their critical thinking like that. So yeah, and the next slide is going to be just more explanations of how we can apply the hat strategy in our classroom. And also we can change the hat into like maybe the color markers that we use in the student paper, like that. And this is just other variations of how we can apply into our classroom in terms of the student self-assessment and how they want us as teacher to know about them. So just want to share with you about that, and hopefully with these strategy and with this focus in the feedback, we can help the students to develop their academic concept from the grammar focus into more of the communications, the contents, essence of the contents in terms of their English writing. And yeah, thank you so much. And I'll end my slides here.
Okay, well, these were all very interesting presentations. And I think just in terms of the time, what we'll do again is some people have been making comments in the chat, and then also I'll put up a place online where people can discuss and ask questions for a further conversation. And so, but before we shift, I want to just make a few comments, because this is actually one of the main areas that I've been working on for a long time. I was teaching writing in 1967, and then that was my dissertation was on it, and I've had used a lot of different strategies at all different levels. And one of the big issues, well, first, we all, in these presentations, there can be a tendency to do either or, grammar or content, phonics or whole language, and that sort of thing. And anytime you use that or, stop and think, because it probably isn't clear cut. It's not or, it's probably both and. So grammar and content. And so then it's a question of the balance. But we talk a lot about the process, writing process, and yet we don't initiate students and give them an understanding of the process right at the beginning. And if we do it sort of step by step by step, they don't really get into the revising and editing until they're have finished an essay. So what I've done is to, at the very first class, or maybe the second class, but the first writing assignment is to choose a topic, like a memory, some memory that you just really have, you'll never forget. And then on the board, we do a web. Students just call out different ideas, and that then gives students a little bit of a framework. They're drawing from their own personal experience. Then they do a quick write, a quick draft, then take that home and actually work on it. And one of the things that I've done too is to, once they've done, have something that's a revised one, is to pass it around the room and everybody reads everybody else's. So they're not, before they go home actually and do their own, they read these quick writes and get a feel, and everybody knows it's just a quick write. But by doing this, passing around, having discussions in groups, they're doing a lot of the things that the presenters talked about, with asking a questions, praise, what I like, and then either suggestions or questions that have implied suggestions within them, giving the students an opportunity to make a choice. Going through that process, they can see what they like about other people's writing, and that then helps them to understand how they can change their own writing so that other people will appreciate it. After going through this process, they get the feedback, then they go home, and then they sit down and do the first draft. But in the process between this brainstorming and a quick write, they've got all this input by reading other people's quick writes and getting ideas and that. They then go and write, do their draft, bring it in, and then in groups, they go through and they do not focus at all on mechanical mistakes. They focus in on the content and have a discussion in the group, again, using some of the strategies. And it's very, very important that if you're going to use peer response in your groups, that you spend a whole session, talking about how to do it. We as teachers have a difficult time and wrestle with giving feedback, and yet we turn it over to students who have no real background and ask them to do it. And it usually results in a whole lot of not very helpful discussion. They're frustrated. But if they really focus, everybody in the group picks out, they're reading one person's, this is something I liked about it, and then talking about it, and then questions they have. Those questions in the peer response, the key thing is not for them to give advice, but their key thing is for them to ask questions, because that then gives the writer an opportunity to expand. And one of the concepts is very difficult is revision, because revision has been reduced pretty much to correcting mistakes. And so what I do with revision is have students do a quick write on some topic, 10, 15 minutes, maybe a page, then to read through and find the sentence that they like best. And that sentence is usually something that is called a topic sentence. It really captures the idea of a paragraph. Then what I have them do is rewrite that same sentence 3 different ways. And then they go through and see which one they like best and why. So they're then on a sentence level getting into the revision process. And so if they're able to do that through their essay, it can really help them understand the relationship between the content and the form and how those two fit in together, the concepts they're trying to get across and the way that they're being expressed. They then bring back that revised draft after the comments, and then with 3 people sitting in a line, one student will have his or her paper in front of them, and they'll put their first finger on the capital, take it all the way to the first period. Then all 3 people are looking at it. Is this a full sentence? Is this, and then getting in there and looking for the mechanical mistakes. And then if they have a question, they ask me, and you go and you give them a little, directed short grammar lesson that sticks with them because it's practical and it's with their own writing. And one thing with models we have to be careful of is that we want not to show them some academic high model, because they can't imitate that. We want to show them other student writing as models. And so then it's a lot more accessible to them, because if they start imitating something that's beyond their zone, there's no real learning that's taking place there. But the 3 of them sit, and then they go through the whole thing looking for editing. And it's very clear, this is an editing process. The student then goes and takes it, revises it again, then hands it in to me. This is the first time I've seen it. So they've gone through this huge process ahead of time, learning about how they can find and learn about mistakes, because as they're reading each other's in that row of 3, they're learning about how they can self-correct. They then turn it in to me, and with any errors, I just put a little line where there's a mistake. And if there are too many, I don't put too many lines. I pick 3 or 4 things that they need to work on and just put lines underneath them. They have to then correct it. And if they don't understand it, they come in the next day and ask, and we talk about it, another grammar lesson. And then I also have them research in some reference book online about a particular rule. And then I put a parentheses around a sentence that just needs to be rewritten. So I'm turning it back over there. I'm not going through like the Katika's paper showing all of these corrections. Students do not learn from us correcting their papers. There's been a huge meta-analysis of writing and writing feedback, and overwhelmingly, students look first at the grade, and that's as far as they go. And if you make them correct it, they'll go through mindlessly and do what you told them to do. And so the thing that's important in this is that they understand the process of this self-correction. And that way, we've gone through, then they hand it in to me and I do the comments. And again, with comments, the students will read them, and it's important to be positive, but it really doesn't, those rarely help them to know what to do the next step. My very first class I took taught at UNM was writing K through 12. There was 40 students in there, and I went through every single one of those 40 papers, did extensive margin notes and errors and writing on them. And I gave them until the last day to turn them in. They turned them in. I told them that they would be available for them in the LLS office. 40 of them, maybe 3 people picked up their papers. So I stopped doing that, except with my doctoral students who I know will pay close attention to it. But doing that process then, feel of the writing process as a whole, and you're doing this in the first 2 or 3 days, 4 or 5 days, that revising and that. They're then learning this process that sets a rhythm for the whole class. So I will stop there. And what we're going to do, Nathan has got you set up into interest groups or breakout rooms. What you're going to do is to go into your breakout room. Each one of you individually is going to write 2 sentences on the concept of development. And this is not something that you should look at any reference, Wikipedia, anything. These should just be 2 sentences that are off the top of your head, and they don't have to be tied in any way to Vygotsky. It's more just what is the general concept of development. You write 2 sentences, put them in your interest group chat, and you can set it up so that when you're chatting, you can put the 2 and you just put it to within your interest group. And then somebody should create either a Google Doc or a Word document. You have a discussion, and all 4, 3, 5 of you come together and create 2 new sentences that capture your ideas. We'll then share those. Somebody will be designated to read them out to the whole group. So, take 3-4 minutes to write your 2 sentences, maybe 10 minutes to chat, and then maybe another 3, 4, 5 minutes to get going. So this whole thing, we'll look at, let's try to bring it back, closest to 6 o'clock, but we can do it a little after that. So are there any questions? All right, so I guess break out.
All right, so whoever is being put into rooms, whoever was late, you're gonna have to wait a second, but it should be open now. And then people who are late, I will do it. Ezra. Okay. So we can see who isn't at their screens right now, whoever's not joining. Because you can just turn it off and disappear and no one knows if you're actually here or not.
So Shaw, are you still on? I'll text him.
Yes, I am. I'm
Okay,
here.
yeah. Well,
I can hear you.
okay. Well, you work out with Nathan.
You can just join the group. So I already did everything, so he just has to join it.
Oh, okay. Which group did you put him in?
Well, Tashawar last week was asthma.
Right, but Asma's here separately. I think.
Oh, what group should he be in?
Yeah, well, let's not put Shaw in with Asma.
Okay. Wait, where did he go? I think that he actually just left.
Okay.
Oh no. Okay. I'm gonna move him to. I'll move
Which
him.
one do we have? Just
I
a
put him in group 6.
All right.
It doesn't matter.
All right. So that, now are you going to go dive in there?
Yeah, I'm gonna go into
Okay.
my group.
And stop recording.
Okay. And you want me to start recording when